Hi there, popping in to announce that we've started a seasonal tarot mail club. What does that mean, you ask? Great question. Every 3 months, recipients receive a small mailer with curated items, essays, and art all around a specific theme. And of course, a personal tarot card pull just for you. There will also be a video of me actually pulling the tarot cards and my description of each card's meaning. If you're interested in joining us, head to our Patreon and check out any tier at $5 a month or above. Cheers, and thanks as always for your support. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Lunatics Radio Hour podcast. My name is Abby Brenker. I am sitting here with Alan Kudan.
Hello.
And today we are continuing our exploration of the intersection of winter and horror with a long-anticipated episode in which Alan will get to talk about The Thing, aka isolation and desolation in winter horror.
Okay, I have a bone to pick.
As always.
I love The Thing quite a bit. However, why are we talking about this during isolation? The Thing is like, it's going to hit almost every list of best movie monsters. Why is it not in the monster section?
Multiple things can be true. And that is something that we found in this series quite a bit. For example, we ended last week talking about The Terror, and we're going to start this week talking about Antarctic expeditions. So I think things get categorized in multiple columns.
Abby, you're killing me here.
It's all right. It's okay. That's how it goes. You know, this isn't Harvard. We can get away with it.
Oh, don't I know it?
So we've talked about winter mythology and real-life snow tragedies, but today we are continuing our exploration of winter horror through the lens of isolation, madness, and psychology. And I think The Thing certainly is a great example of paranoia and some of the side effects of being trapped in a place with limited other people for a long time.
So I will say that John Carpenter's 1982, The Thing, fits this category. There are multiple other media entries into the Thing franchise, whether before or after that movie. And those are far more monster-based, while John Carpenter's is definitely psychological.
And we're definitely going to talk about all the iterations of The Thing today, because I like to keep things a little bit nice and tidy. But we could definitely talk about them next week, too, as they come up in the Monster series.
All right, we'll see.
We'll see. Let's talk about our sources. A Medical News Today article by Danielle Dresden, What to Know About Cabin Fever. A scientific study on the JAMA Network by Dr. Eugene Ziskind called Isolation, Stress in Medical and Mental Illness. A study on social isolation and psychosis from 2021 on PubMed called An Investigation of Social Interactions and Paranoia in Daily Life. Another study we found on PubMed from 2008, Psychological Effects of Polar Expeditions. Yet another study listed on PubMed, The Role of Circadian Phase in Sleep and Performance During Antarctic Winter Expeditions from 2022. A Slash Film article by Danielle Ryan, The Haunted History Behind The Shining's Stanley Hotel. A sci-fi article by Josh Weiss, The Thing Oral History, Cast and Crew Reveal Secrets of John Carpenter's Sci-Fi Horror Masterpiece. An important byproduct of winter is isolation, especially in situations when weather is so extreme, it becomes a physical barrier between people. Isolation can induce paranoia and other psychological disorders. One of the big themes today that we're going to talk about over and over again is that isolation tends to amplify what's already there. Obviously, The Shining is a great example of that. It can bring out the most extreme thing that somebody sort of has already within them.
The different movie.
There are so many horror films that center around isolation. The Lighthouse, The Blair Witch Project, The Descent, I Am Legend, Buried, science fiction films like High Life. But of course, for this series, we are focused on the overlap of isolation and winter weather. I think the pinnacle example is The Shining, and Alan thinks the pinnacle example is The Thing. But we're also going to talk about The Lodge, Let the Right One In, and other winter horror films that rely on desolation. But first, let's establish the baseline. Cabin fever describes the psychological symptoms someone may experience if they are unable to leave a place or have limited social interactions for a period of time. There's a lot of similarities to some of the stuff we're going to talk about here with COVID and when people were in, quarantining for COVID.
Which COVID?
19. These symptoms can range from general anxiety and boredom to restlessness, impatience, irritability, depression, and hopelessness. And of course, we are not doctors, we're not psychologists, we're parroting back stuff from the internet, so take that all with a grain of salt.
Because that's a big news flash, everybody.
It's good to have a disclaimer in there, you know? But there's more extreme mental conditions that can also result from physical isolation. There was a study done in 1958 by Dr. Eugene Ziskind that explored this very topic. Quoting now from the abstract of the study on JAMA Network, quote, "Sufficiently prolonged isolation from society or deprivation of sensory stimuli can produce mental abnormalities in the form of hallucinations, anxiety states, depression, and paranoid symptoms. Conditions likely to induce these phenomena occur clinically in patients kept in the dark after cataract operations, in persons with severe impairment of hearing, in poliomyelitic victims confined to respirators, in prisoners kept in solitary confinement, and in refugees handicapped by language difficulties."
It reminds me of white room isolation torture.
What is that?
You put your prisoner into a white room.
Yeah.
Everything is white, all the furniture, blinding lights everywhere. There's no shadows. The only color you can see is white, and it just causes extreme duress.
Yeah, it's something we're actually going to talk about in a few minutes again, because we're starting with some of the polar explorations, and that's something they literally in their journals described, like trekking into the snow for days and days with no visual breaks in what they were seeing was causing them to go crazy.
Yep, this is a great way just to like break people for interrogation.
Yeah. It's also similar to like the beginning of Old Boy. I was thinking about that as I was reading some of these journals where this guy is being kept in this room and, you know, the noise is repetitive and everything it's just like exactly what you're saying, but in a long-term torture situation. Back to the quote here. "Monotony and isolation can also affect certain occupational groups, such as long-distance truck drivers, monitors of radar screens, watchmen, and assembly line workers. The underlying nervous mechanisms are not yet understood, but prevention and treatment are simple. This is well illustrated by the experience with cataract surgery, which in the past has been followed by psychoses in as many as 7% of cases. Since improvements of techniques have permitted reduction of the period of bilateral bandaging of the eyes to 1 day or less."
That's the fanciest way to say, like, your eyes are covered.
Well, these are science people.
Bilateral eye... What?
Bilateral bandaging of the eyes.
Yeah, you can't see.
To 1 day or less, the incidence of prospective psychosis has fallen below 1%, end quote. So I think we're not going to do a lot of like heavy scientific jargon today, but I do think that kind of sets the baseline a little bit.
I mean, I'll try.
Yeah, don't you always? There was another study published in 2021 by a handful of researchers investigating the connection between isolation and paranoia. Their study found that patients were more likely to suffer from greater paranoia when alone than when in company, and that social company seemed to limit paranoia. So if you were somebody who was prone to paranoia or other things like that, being around people often helped with that a lot. I just think it's almost like something you and I experience on a day-to-day sometimes. Like if we don't get outside our small apartment, we have a very small apartment. If for some reason there's been a day or two where one of us hasn't gotten out and left physically, you start to feel that anxiety and that like unnamed antsiness almost creep up a little bit.
I've known a couple people throughout my life that have pretty severe paranoia.
Yeah.
First is like, is it a chicken or the egg thing? Because like they always end up being shut-ins. It kind of developed while they were being shut-in. You know, like it makes sense. It's like you're paranoid, so you lock your door. You don't see anybody.
Right.
But that's not usually how it goes. It's usually it's a very gradual slope, and the paranoia only sets in well after you begin to self-isolate.
Again, it amplifies that, right? There have been many studies conducted on the effects of solitary confinement on prisoners and the impact of isolation caused by COVID-19 quarantining on society generally. During enforced self-isolation, like pandemic lockdowns, studies have linked longer isolation, lack of interaction, and limited space with increased psychotic symptoms and cognitive problems in patients. Some older clinical research describes a syndrome of perceptual and thought disturbances resulting from prolonged social isolation and sensory restriction. Research on solitary confinement, one of the most extreme real-world forms of isolation, links it to psychotic symptoms like hallucination delusions, cognitive disturbances and emotional dysregulation, and increased risk of self-harm and long-term psychiatric damage. These effects are widely reported in sociological and psychological studies.
Do you remember the movie Rocket Man?
Ooh, not really.
Let me show you the cover for it.
Is it the Elton John movie?
No.
Oh.
It's not the Elton John movie.
Whoa, that's trippy. He's got a small head and a big body.
Now that is quality commentary, Abby. Thank you.
What is this?
You never okay, so you never saw this movie?
No.
I did. It
looks like a movie made for 8th grade boys.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Maybe a little earlier. Or at least that's who it's made for. It's a comedy about being an astronaut.
Okay.
To become an astronaut, you have to like effectively pass an isolation test where they lock you in an isolation chamber and you have to just be by yourself for however long, 30 days or something. I don't know. It's traditionally a very grueling exam that not everybody passes. Because even if you have all the right things, it's like when you're going into submarine work, you have to pass the claustrophobia test.
It weeds out the weak.
Or it's like a phobia you didn't know that you really had.
Sure.
Or you've been able to overcome it in small doses and like you've got a good constitution, so you didn't really think it was a huge issue. But when really pushed to the limit, it breaks certain people. Anyways, this movie, the guy gets locked in there for the entire length of duration. And they're just trying to get him out of the program because he's a total clown. And then they open the door at the end of the isolation period, expecting him to see like a mess of a human. And he's really disappointed that it's over because he wasn't done with the shadow puppets.
That's fun. It's also similar, like obviously Gravity is not winter horror, but Gravity is a good example. Like space, there's a ton of isolation space movies we could talk about.
Did we do an isolation horror?
We did an episode on the history of isolation, episode 83. And I remember actually we recorded this when I was in Maine and you were in New York and we recorded it remotely.
How do we do that?
You sent me away with a microphone setup.
Oh, I mailed you the drop kit?
You gave it to me to bring up.
I didn't give it to you. You had to return it.
All right. So generally, we know that extreme isolation comes with the potential side effect of negative impact on mental health, which is a very broad statement, but one that depends on so many factors, from the individual's history with mental health to how extreme the isolation is in other circumstances. Even just looking at the abundance of seasonal affective disorder, or SAD. Seasonal affective disorder is a clinically recognized form of depression that follows a seasonal pattern, most often emerging in fall or winter, as reduced daylight disrupts circadian rhythms and neurotransmitter regulation. Common symptoms include persistent low mood, fatigue, social withdrawal, sleep, and appetite changes, illustrating how light deprivation alone can alter mood and perception even before isolation or trauma are introduced. But as we talk through both real-life cases of extreme isolation today and horror inspired by those cases, let's keep this all in mind.
Keep what in mind?
All these psychological elements that we just discussed.
I will try.
Last week, Alan talked a bit about the HMS Terror, but that's one of several expeditions that ended up trapped in an inhospitable landscape. The Belgian Antarctic expedition started in 1897 and lasted for 2 years. It was led by Adrien de Gerlache aboard the Belgica and became a grim case study in what prolonged isolation can do to the human mind. After becoming trapped in pack ice, the crew unintentionally became the first expedition to overwinter in Antarctica, plunging them into months of darkness, extreme cold, monotony, and confinement.
Pack ice it's like you'd expect it, but it's also just kind of terrifying. It's frozen seawater because, all water freezes, of course.
Sure.
But you think of, the ocean freezing as kind of crazy. And then, glaciers, is that really just the ocean? I guess so.
Yeah.
But still, just, the ocean freezing over seems crazy. But sheets of ice, obviously it's not going to freeze all the way to the bottom, but sheets of ice across the top freeze. And bays, of course, freeze. That's how polar bears walk around. These sheets of ice, which are little pieces, normally as your boat just kind of bumps through them. But eventually there get to be so many of them and it's so dense that it basically becomes a floor. Then that floor eventually stops moving enough and then freezes solid.
Right, it freezes to itself.
Exactly, and then you have a giant floor of ice. And now suddenly the top layer of the ocean is frozen.
Wild.
So that's one of the things, you're pushing through even really dense pack ice, but it's not just, completely solid. And that's one of the things, they talk about this a lot in The Terror. As a captain, you have to be able to take one look at that, are we going to get stuck in that or no?
Right.
Because if yes, then get the fuck out of there. But if you think no, and this is how we get through it, because if you also risk the long way around might also kill you.
Have you ever listened to an episode of Lunatics Radio Hour and thought, man, I'd love to wear a shirt or carry a tote bag that represents my interest in this very niche topic?
I know I have.
If you're in the market for a doppelganger-themed tank top or a Bloody Mary tote bag, we've got you covered. Head to lunaticsproject.com and click on merch to browse our haunting and highly specific merch store. So for those stuck in the pack ice, morale very quickly unraveled. Crew members reported insomnia, hallucinations, severe depression, and this creeping paranoia. Men began to distrust one another, and tempers flared. Some sailors grew convinced that they were being deliberately poisoned or sabotaged.
And sometimes they were.
This psychological deterioration was intensified by scurvy, malnutrition, and the relentless sameness of their environment. A perfect pressure cooker for suspicion and fear.
And the complete lack of women.
Doesn't help.
I don't understand why they say a woman on board is bad luck.
Well, we did that whole series on Sailor Luck.
Yeah, but that's...
Well, I think it really... I mean, if I was going to put on my conjecture hat, I would...
Hold on, no. What does your conjecture hat look like?
It looks like the cursed hat from What We Do in the Shadows.
Okay, with the witch's asshole.
But it has like a little feather on it.
Uh-huh, so... It's the same exact hat.
Yeah. So I would say that having women on board was dangerous for women, right? In those situations when you're out to sea. Yeah, don't give me that face. When you're out to sea with a bunch of men, there's fewer women that at these times would agree to be part of this.
I'm not disagreeing with you.
Yeah.
But do you really think the male captain would care about that?
Yeah, because I think it's a distraction. I think it would be a distraction from what they were trying to do.
It's definitely
and it would cause drama and it would cause issue, and I think it's like I don't think the captains were like, oh, this is a safety concern for the women, which it was, but I think they were more like, this is going to, it's like there's this whole piece of history around the history of Valentine's Day where I forget the exact specifics, but I think the king that was the king of France at the time wouldn't let any of the members of his army have spouses or girlfriends because it was a distraction from the wars that they needed to go fight.
So instead they brought young boys.
Exactly.
Not even joking.
The Belgica expedition is now frequently cited in psychological research as an early, well-documented example of how isolation and sensory deprivation can distort perception, foster paranoia, and push otherwise rational individuals towards mental collapse when cut off from normal social and environmental anchors. But 11 years later, Robert Falcon Scott's Terra Nova expedition started in 1910 and lasted until 1913. The Terra Nova expedition is a huge piece of history, and we are going to talk about it at a pretty high level. One of the really fascinating elements is that there's photographs. There was photographs and journals recovered, which we're going to read a little bit from today, but I'm going to post on Instagram actually photos both from the Belgica and from the Terra Nova expedition because there's photos that exist. There's way more for the Terra Nova expedition. I think it's really interesting to be able to see these men in the boats and, in some of the conditions that we're talking about today. So head to Instagram to check out those photos.
That's it. Well, it's actually an interesting story. Do you know why significantly more photos exist for Terra Nova? It's
because it's slightly later in time.
Slightly later in time, and where their boat got stuck, they still had Wi-Fi, so they were posting constantly.
Robert Falcon Scott led a group to Antarctica.
Come on, that's quality.
Robert Falcon Scott led a group to Antarctica with a handful of scientific and research goals. Additionally, the group was hoping to be the first to reach the geographic South Pole. So there's 3 different expeditions we're going to talk about within this Terra Nova expedition. So Scott's group did reach the pole on January 17th, 1912. They found out, and sadly, devastatingly, they found out that a Norwegian team had actually beaten them by 34 days. The 5 members of Scott's party perished on the return trip. The 5 men died slowly and in different stages. Edgar Evans was the first to pass. He had suffered a serious head injury earlier in the march, likely from a fall, and as the weeks passed, he became increasingly confused and physically impaired. On February 17, 1912, near the foot of Beardmore Glacier, Evans collapsed and died, probably from a combination of traumatic brain injury, hypothermia, and starvation. Lawrence Oates followed. He was suffering from severe frostbite and possibly gangrene, barely able to walk and slowing the group to a dangerous pace. He was aware that his condition endangered the others, and Oates made a deliberate, brave, and fatal decision on March 16th, 1912. He left the tent during a blizzard, reportedly saying, quote, "I'm just going outside and maybe sometime," end quote. He was never seen again and certainly died very quickly from exposure.
We don't know that.
Well, the bodies were discovered later.
Oh.
Scott, Wilson, and Bowers survived longer. After continuing some ways, they became trapped by a blizzard just 11 miles from a food depot. Immobilized, out of fuel, and nearly out of food, they gradually succumbed to starvation, hypothermia, and extreme exhaustion. Scott's final diary entries suggest clarity, alternating with despair as their bodies failed. The three men died in their tent in late March 1912, likely within days of one another, ending one of the most harrowing episodes in polar exploration. 8 months later, a rescue team recovered the journals, photographs, bodies, and other things. The journals revealed the harsh experiences suffered by the men, including confinement, prolonged darkness, extreme cold, starvation, and of course, exhaustion. Mood swings are evident in their writings, along with fatalistic thinking, irritability, and moments of disordered reasoning that today might be associated with stress-induced psychosis or severe depressive states, rather than simple loss of morale.
I do wonder, like, it's really hard to picture yourself in these situations. This is not the age of exploration because that was like on big wooden ships going around the world. This is like the last frontier on Earth that is not underwater. It seems like through the lens of modern sensibility, going on an exploration to just do the thing, you know, like that where you're probably going to die. Just to say you got to the center of Antarctica, something that no one else has ever done before, because they keep dying, seems foolish.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe I understand to like it puts your name in the history books, and for a lot of people, that's incredibly important. But you know, Scott's crew, or you know, as they were known as Scott's Tots, they all gave up their lives for a seemingly frivolous goal.
Well, I don't know. I mean, listen, you have people still who climb Mount Everest, even though people die all the time. You have people who are volunteer. Like, I think the version of it today is volunteering to be on a SpaceX mission to Mars or whatever. You know, it's like there's always that new thing that's like there's a risk that the shuttle's going to explode. There's a risk that, and people do it because, to your point, you're right. Like, I think they want the fame of it. They have this thirst for exploration and infamy and whatever it is, and they're willing to take the risk.
So the Terra was trying to find the Northwest Passage, a shipping route. However, what is the point when it's completely chock full of ice? You're not doing much shipping through solid ice. So it doesn't seem like, maybe it's a seasonal thing, but then...
I think they wanted to chart it. They wanted to map it.
I see. Okay. So you map it out despite the conditions. And then once you know where it is, you can get through during Arctic summer.
I also think, to your point, it's like one of those few places on Earth at the time that was unmapped. Yeah, so be able to go into the unknown, like that was one of the last times humanity could do that.
Yeah, I guess that's human spirit. They just want to explore. It's, I don't know, I think about this a lot because I read tons of sci-fi. And so there's lots of dialogue with alien species. So much commentary on the human condition or the aliens' sensibilities and all these things. But it's always written by humans, of course, because otherwise, wow, what a find. And so it's, you know, it's like the brain diagnosing itself. It is just kind of odd that the people have such a drive to explore into the unknown, no matter what the cost, just out of what? Curiosity. But it's human nature. It feels so normal to risk absolutely everything for possibly and most likely nothing, for just the slight chance of, hey, we found a thing.
Yeah, it's like pioneering. I don't know. It's
the allure. And I don't know, is that societal, or is that...
I think that's all scientists. Like, I think scientists dedicate their lives in a lot of ways, like cancer researchers. They're doing it because they think that there's some value to society to do it. Like, people who are going into space are doing it because they think there's some value to the future state of society. I think it's the same thing with cancer researchers, disease researchers, environmental researchers. I think they feel like they're trying to solve for a problem.
Yeah, I don't know. That for me, that feels far more tangible because, like, this is the problem we have. We're trying to solve it.
I think it's different from like, I know I said Everest earlier. I think it's different. I think people who are climbing Mount Everest are trying to push their physical bodies to the limit to be like, I did this, right? And I think that's different from people who are like motivated scientifically, like this Terra Nova expedition. I said they were trying to reach the South Pole, but there was all other sorts of like scientific research and studies they were doing along the way. That wasn't the only thing. It's closer in the camp of, I'm not trying to come back and be like, I ran, a 100-mile marathon. It's like, I hiked Mount Everest. I did this thing. I think it's more so I'm trying to collect this information and I'm rugged enough to go into the world and do it.
Antarctica is such a time capsule of our planet because it's literally frozen and preserved.
Yeah.
I was just watching a video and they were just like drilling down into a glacier. And, it was just a time lapse of the camera going through it. And it's like, this ice is 1 million years old. This ice is 3 million years old. This ice is 5 million years old. And now we hit the rock underneath. Cool. Every time you watch a movie about Antarctic research, they're always taking core samples.
Yeah.
And that means they're just drilling out a piece of ice and studying it because that is like a little microcosm of the biosphere of the time.
Right.
And like, I don't know, that's kind of cool. You're getting ice that's 5 million years old, unchanged in the last 5 million years.
It's super cool. It's super cool.
And then you thaw it, and then the super virus comes out.
That's right.
Not even joking.
While still alive, the group pushed towards the South Pole, and isolation intensified into near total sensory deprivation. So this is kind of what you were talking about earlier. The white landscape literally blended into itself and the sky. It was likened to other sorts of sensory torture. There was no visual relief or temporal markers, which can destabilize perception. There's a few different quotes from Scott's journal on this, but I'm going to read this one.
Scott Stotts.
Quote, the eternal silence of the great white desert, cloudy columns of snowdrift advancing from the south, pale yellow wraiths heralding the coming storm, blotting out one by one the sharp-cut lines of the land, end quote. The journals also revealed Scott's increasingly rigid adherence to plans, even as conditions deteriorated, and the group's difficulty adapting to catastrophic setbacks suggests cognitive narrowing, a known effect of extreme stress and isolation. By the final weeks, starvation and hypothermia compounded psychological collapse, blurring the line between rational endurance and impaired thought. The Terra Nova expedition stands as a haunting example of how isolation in extreme environments can subtly undermine mental clarity long before physical survival finally fails, turning the Antarctic itself into an unseen antagonist working on the mind as much as the body. I will say this, though. Reading the journals, the mood seems to be merry for much longer than you would expect. There's like this camaraderie, or at least the way that Scott's writing about it. He's like, you know what? Things are horrible. Things are terrible. But you wouldn't know it from the drunken songs we're singing in the tent. Like there was this, for a long time in the journals, this sort of underline of morale, at least.
I mean, he was just ahead of his time. Like, that's exactly what we do with social media. Everyone's like the world is fucking on fire.
Yeah.
And people are like, but living my best self, hashtag girl boss.
Well, I think it's more similar to the musicians playing as the Titanic sank. It's like, okay, this is happening, so we can go out depressed and angry, or we can celebrate our lives, you know?
Or he was just a self-delusioned, pompous ass.
Sure.
Where like the men are freezing to death and he's like, but it's for my cause.
Right.
Side note, just you were talking, as soon as you said the white desert, it reminded me of nuclear winter. Do you know how nuclear winter happens? Because it's kind of cool.
If this isn't quite enough chaotic horror and history content to scratch your itch, consider joining our Patreon. We have a ton of fun creating bonus episodes, writing essays that explore some of our favorite horror topics, and presenting spooky classic literature. Plus, all new members get a welcome package in the mail, a lifetime discount to our merch store, and new stickers whenever we have new designs to share. Head to patreon.com/lunaticsproject to join. Okay, let me put on my conjecture hat again. I believe that, this is my conjecture, that so much of nuclear bombs are going off and that it causes another ice age by fucking up like the ozone layer or something like that.
Close. Bombs go off.
Yeah.
Huge ash clouds, debris,
Oh, yeah.
So that it basically
blocks out the sun.
It causes things to freeze because it blocks the sun. The earth gets cold. It turns into winter. But it gets so much of the planet is covered in a simultaneous winter that it becomes reflective.
Yeah.
And then all of the white bounces the light back. And then there's not enough heat to physically thaw it. And the entire world is then plunged into an ice age because the winter continues to spread around the planet.
Rock and roll.
And then you're stuck like that for a long time. I don't know how ice ages end, but I guess they eventually do because we've gone through multiple. We should watch the movie.
Ice Age?
The great documentary.
Quoting from Robert Falcon Scott's journal, quote, "Had we lived, I should have had a tale to tell of the hardihood, endurance, and courage of my companions, which would have stirred the heart of every Englishman." A lot of his quotes, he refers to them being Englishmen.
The Endurance was a different ship.
"These rough notes in our dead bodies must tell the tale," end quote. During Scott's Terra Nova expedition, the Northern and Western parties, which were separate field groups with very different fates, each endured isolation in their own way. The Northern Party, known grimly as the Inexpressible Island Party, consisted of Victor Campbell, Raymond Priestley, George Murray Levick, and Petty Officer George Abbott. In 1912, they were stranded along the coast of northern Victoria Land after their ship failed to retrieve them. With no proper hut and minimal supplies, they were forced to overwinter in a crude snow cave dug into the side of Inexpressible Island. For months, they survived on seals and penguins, burned blubber for heat, lived in darkness, filth, and extreme confinement.
And now you have to pay for such experiences.
That's right. The diaries recovered describe emotional volatility, irritability, and mental fog. Again, these are classic signs of prolonged isolation. Despite this group survived and later completed a harrowing trek back to base, making them one of the expedition's few psychological and physical survival stories. The Western Party, which was led by geologist Griffith Taylor, operated earlier in the expedition and included Frank Debenham, Charles Wright, and Edgar Evans before Evans was reassigned to the Polar Party. Their mission focused on geological and mapping work in the McMurdo Dry Valleys. Although they endured severe cold and isolation, they benefited from shorter journeys, clearer objectives, and more reliable support. Still, their writings reflect the mental strain of polar monotony and the unsettling emptiness of the Antarctic landscape. To your point, Alan, this is somebody who went out on one journey, survived it, went out on one expedition, survived, and went out on another and died, right? So there is some kind of allure here for people.
I made that point.
Yeah, you were talking about how there's some allure for people to do these extreme things.
Yeah, I guess it's also your job. I don't know. Is explorer a job?
Yeah, I think these are scientists.
What year is this now?
Early 1900s, like 1910.
Sorry, when was the Titanic?
1912.
Okay, so this was
right around the same time.
About this. Okay, they should have just taken the Titanic through the Arctic. Can't sink if you're stuck in pack ice.
Compared to Scott's Polar Party and the Northern Party, the Western Party escaped catastrophe, but their experience still illustrates how even successful fieldwork in this kind of state taxed the mind as much as the body. Together, these parties showed the expedition's full psychological spectrum, from survival through adaptability to collapse under isolation. During extended stays in polar regions, particularly during polar night, which is a period in which the sun remains continuously below the horizon for weeks to months, those living or exploring the region experience profound disruption of circadian rhythms, as external light cues that normally regulate sleep-wake cycles and hormonal balances are absent, leading to sleep disturbances, mood changes, and impaired cognitive performance.
I wonder if the blind are susceptible to SAD.
Oh, interesting. I hadn't thought about that.
Because I know it's like vitamin D through the skin.
And it talks about this cataract, right? We talked earlier about the cataract. It seems very similar to that. I guess maybe it depends in some cases if somebody was born blind. This is, again, me wearing my conjecture hat. And maybe, you know, we're always accustomed to that versus someone going blind later in life and having to adjust to the new normal.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Research on Antarctic overwintering crews, those PubMed studies that we mentioned in today's sources, have documented significant circadian misalignment, with many expeditioners experiencing shorter sleep, mood deterioration, and impaired cognitive functioning.
It's also cold as shit.
Yeah.
Good luck sleeping when you're cold.
And stressed and afraid you're going to die.
And, you know, you're only surrounded by a bunch of sweaty dudes that haven't, like, showered in months.
Yikes. Let's jump ahead a little bit. It was the fall of 1974 when Stephen King and his wife stayed at the Stanley Hotel. The hotel was about to close for the winter. It was a 3-season hotel at the time, and only a small crew was remaining to take care of it. The Stanley Hotel overlooks Estes Park in Colorado, and it is no surprise that King named his fictionalized version of this hotel the Overlook in The Shining. At the time of their stay, the hotel was having a bit of trouble attracting guests.
A problem it does not have now.
The Kings were actually the only paying guests at the time, and they stayed in the presidential suite, room 217.
The rest are ghosts?
No, like comps or, whatever. They were the only guests there.
Paying guests.
Paying guests. The story goes that Stephen King had a nightmare that night. He dreamt that his son was being chased down a long hallway in the hotel by a possessed fire hose.
Freud would have a field day with that one.
He woke up in a cold sweat and went to the balcony to smoke. It is here that he came up with the idea for The Shining, his third novel. This would be his first best-selling book. King's book, and of course Kubrick's movie, have helped to inspire a resurgence in the hotel, which now, as you said, Alan, does not struggle to fill rooms.
Now, especially that you can go there and practice the Estes method.
That's right. Look at you. Stephen King's The Shining hit bookstores in January of 1977.
Whoopah!
Kubrick's movie adaptation was released 3 years later in 1980. Sometimes it blows my mind how quickly the film version of something comes out.
Yes and no. I was thinking about this the other day. Just about every Hollywood movie was a book.
I don't know about that.
I would say the vast majority of Hollywood movies were books.
I don't know about that either.
Okay, well, I'm sure. I'm going to say yes.
Okay.
So the key is that people don't like adapted books. From whatever standpoint, it seems too highbrow. They want original content. So if a book comes out and it's good, rights get snapped up immediately. And they immediately want to turn it into a movie.
Mm-hmm.
That's why things happen quick. And then you find out things like Avatar were never books.
Right. To my point.
And then but that's James Cameron money. James Cameron can do whatever the fuck you want.
There's so many there's so many films that are not based on books.
Yeah, sorry, indie films, absolutely, because that requires licensing and rights. I said Hollywood movies.
I still think so.
Name one Hollywood movie that's not a book. You can't do it.
One battle after another.
That was an excellent novella.
No, it wasn't. Stephen King actually wrote an entire screenplay draft of The Shining, which Kubrick never read. Instead, he spent 11 weeks working on a new screenplay with author Diane Johnson. Kubrick is also known for calling King's writing, quote, weak. Despite his harsh criticism, Kubrick actually called King during the writing process. At 7 a.m, King's phone rang. Now, when he's talking about this, he reports that Kubrick asked him, quote, I think stories of the supernatural are fundamentally optimistic, don't you? If there are ghosts, then that means we survive death, end quote.
Sorry to rain on your parade yet again.
Here we go.
One Battle After Another is a free adaptation reimagining of Thomas Pynchon's 1990 novel, Vineland.
Okay, the next series that we're going to have on this podcast will just be a debate between you and I, and we will bring forth our evidence.
About what? Anything? Anything and everything.
About this topic, about how many Hollywood films are based on adaptations versus original material.
Since Hollywood was founded in the early 20th century, I think there's only been about 4, maybe 5 movies.
Save it for the debate on. King countered that it isn't that optimistic if you think of hell. Kubrick simply responded that he didn't believe in hell. And of course, Stephen King wasn't wowed with the Kubrick version once it was released. This is kind of a tale as old as time.
Yeah, he hates all movies and then he directs crap himself and he's like, it's so much better now, but it's awful.
What was that one movie he directed that we watched?
Sorry, it wasn't awful.
It was a car.
Yeah, it's Maximum Overdrive. Was that?
Yeah, that was wild. Yeah, it was good.
That was pretty good.
Yeah,
I liked it, but no one else did.
In a 1983 interview with Playboy, King said, quote, I'd admired Kubrick for a long time and had great expectations for the project, but I was deeply disappointed in the end result. Parts of the film are chilling, charged with a relentlessly claustrophobic terror, but others fell flat, end quote. He specifically took issue with the casting, quote, Jack Nicholson, though a fine actor, was all wrong for the part, King said. Quote, his last big role had been in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and between that and the manic grin, the audience automatically identified him as a loony from the first scene. But the book is about Jack Torrance's gradual descent into madness through the malign influence of the Overlook. If the guy is nuts to begin with, then the entire tragedy of his downfall is wasted, end quote.
And then he goes on to play the Joker.
These two versions of the story are notoriously different. King's version of Jack is sympathetic, but in Kubrick's version, he becomes a full-fledged movie villain.
And the movie's better.
Yeah. In King's version, the hotel is certainly haunted. And in Kubrick's, it's more ambiguous until you kind of get to that final image.
Sorry, I know people love The Shining book. It's just different. I mean, that's King in a nutshell of how the book is always going to be different than the movie. Same story, very different tones, very different ideas. That's always going to be a thing. I also don't like Stephen King's writing style. It's not for me. It's too all over the place. I feel like he always tries to put too much into every book. The perfect example, Salem's Lot, where jumping around, there's 10 trillion characters, and you're supposed to care about every single one of them. And if you don't, Stephen King personally comes to your house and punches you in the face. So, I don't know, the movie adaptation was kind of fun.
Yeah, I think to me, King is, like, I don't dislike his writing largely, but I think it's like he's so prolific that it's like 1 in 100 books I like, that's exaggeration, but 1 in 10 I really love. I also think for me, I often feel like a loyalty to the version of the thing I experienced first. And I certainly watched the movie so many times in my life before I ever got to the book. And I've read the book and I don't dislike it, but I don't know. To me, the film is so special and so pinnacle in horror history. And I think it's so freaking good that it's hard to like strip that away from my brain when I'm reading this book that's more of like this slow burn, right? When the film is so visual and interesting and bizarre. And so, yeah, they're just different versions of the story. And I also think, they don't need to be pitted against each other also.
I mean, it's also Kubrick. It's so visually striking.
Yeah, he's a master. I mean, they're both masters, but Kubrick is really a master.
That's his whole thing is visual storytelling.
Yeah.
Where, there's a reason that every film student has to watch Stanley Kubrick shit night and day.
Yeah.
But yes, again, a lot of people love Stephen King's writing. It's a lot of people's favorite, horror author.
Which Kubrick movies did you have to watch in film school? And I'll tell you which ones I had to watch.
I'd say the two big ones were Barry Lyndon. Every one is like a little masterclass in a very
different thing.
Yeah. So Barry Lyndon, because they shot without movie lights for a few scenes.
Just like The Witch.
Well, yeah, but that's a modern movie with modern equipment. Back then, they if Stanley Kubrick said, I want to do a scene with just candles, and you're shooting on film with old Hollywood shit, like that just didn't happen.
Right.
They
wasn't bright enough to illuminate.
Right. They literally made lenses specifically for Stanley Kubrick. They made like these super speed lenses where they only made a few copies. Some got sold to Barry Lyndon, the others got sold to NASA.
Interesting.
Then the other one being Eyes Wide Shut, because again, that was a masterclass in how to do mixed color temperatures. Everything is strong orange, strong blues. And like previously, that's just like it breaks all the rules. But when Kubrick does it, it's like, oh, so that's the new rule. Because, rules are made by the masters.
Right. I had to watch 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Oh, of course. I forgot about that one.
And Doctor Strangelove.
A movie I've never seen.
Oh.
Although I did see the sequel, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. And it was not as good.
Yeah. Kubrick deliberately strips away some of the exposition. This aligns with existential horror, the terror of never knowing whether madness comes from inside or outside, right? We don't know enough about Jack Torrance's mental health history in the movie to know if this is something that's caused by this hotel or if this is something that was already there.
Meanwhile, that was Stephen King's number one complaint.
Yeah.
Was that it was too on the nose.
This ambiguity mirrors real isolation psychology, where hallucinations, paranoia, and dissociation are common in prolonged confinement. There are quite a few conspiracy theories about the Shining movie, which are fairly heavy, so a bit of a content warning here. One theory is that the film is actually about Jack sexually abusing his son, and his wife refuses to acknowledge this until the end. Again, these are theories, as none of this is based in, and no filmmaker has come forward and said that this is true. There's an entire website dedicated to this theory and Easter eggs throughout the movie that help solidify the theory. One of them being the fact that Jack is reading a Playgirl magazine in the lobby with a cover article about incest. The theory is maintained by Rob Ager. He's collected evidence on this page, collectivelearning.com, if you want to explore this more. The Shining is obviously an incredibly strong example of horror derived from winter isolation. Stephen King has repeatedly stated that The Shining is fundamentally about alcoholism and cyclical abuse, written while he himself was drinking heavily and terrified of harming his own family.
Yeah, see, it's all about him.
Isolation in winter removes external restraints. No job, no social accountability, no escape. Jack Torrance's descent is not sudden madness, but in King's version, the slow resurfacing of addiction and rage. The Overlook functions as an accelerant, not the root cause. King later said that he was, quote, writing about himself without fully realizing it at the time. I mean, so much of King's writing features people who are dealing with addiction. That's one of the main themes because that's something he went through in his life.
Yeah, you write what you know.
Exactly.
People love Stephen King. It's just not my preferred writing style. If you want a more straightforward horror literary experience without, lots of layered ambiguity, check out R.L. Stine.
Goosebumps. I would say personally, my favorite Stephen King novel, and I'm not a total hater, is Pet Sematary. That scared me. Like, my mom has a story about how she and my dad eloped in New Orleans when she had moved down there, and she was living, I think maybe without power. Like, some reason the power had gone out in their house in New Orleans, and she didn't know anybody yet. And so she was just sort of like reading Salem's Lot and how scary and terrifying it was for her. I think my version of that is Pet Sematary. And I wasn't living in a house with no power, but Pet Sematary is a Stephen King novel that, I don't know, like moved me emotionally. I thought it was devastating emotionally, but also horrifying and scary. And I think it was very successful for me at hitting all the notes that Stephen King aims to hit, which is both something that's scary, but it's also emotionally devastating typically.
I'm trying to think if I've ever been really terrified by a book, and I don't think I have.
You know the scariest book I've ever read? And Then There Were None.
What's that about?
It's an Agatha Christie book. It's a very, very redone theme in horror at this point, but I think it's kind of one of the originators, which is these people all receive mysterious invitations to arrive on this like private island.
Like Glass Onion.
With a fancy house, and one by one they are killed and they don't know what's going on, and the people they don't know who lives there, and they're killed, and there's like this twist ending at the end. But I remember I read that when I was like in my early 20s. I was living in an apartment in Williamsburg, and I was up on the couch in the living room with all the lights on at night because I was too afraid to go to my room. It really, for a book that was very old, it really got me.
I can picture you standing on the couch. That's something you still do.
Sometimes you just got to stretch your legs.
On the floor.
This is a great example of isolation being an accelerant for underlying or pre-existing mental health issues. But the film isn't just about Jack's unraveling. Wendy is also isolated in the movie, not just geographically, but also mentally. She is economically and emotionally tied to Jack. She's trapped. Kubrick's direction emphasizes her entrapment, turning the Overlook into a pressure chamber for intimate partner violence. Winter removes witnesses. Another element to discuss with The Shining is the historic context that Kubrick adds. Kubrick layers Native American imagery throughout the hotel, visually reinforcing that the Overlook is built atop historic violence. The ghosts are not random. They are American ghosts. Wealth, erasure, masculinity, and inherited brutality repeating across generations. The final photograph suggests that Jack has not been possessed, but absorbs into history, trapped in a loop. Winter horror often frames nature as hostile, but The Shining frames history itself as inescapable. The loop is both commentary on societal violence, but also the cycles of domestic violence and untreated mental health conditions and addiction. There is also a duality here between the presentation of masculinity and sensitivity. Not that these concepts are necessarily mutually exclusive in real life, but they are represented as at odds in The Shining. Jack's role as a failed writer is not incidental. Jack's rage grows as his identity collapses. The Overlook offers him an alternative masculinity, authority over violence, and permanence through destruction. This is one reason the film resonates with anxieties about male failure and entitlement. On the other end of the spectrum, Danny is not just a victim. He represents survival through sensitivity. His shining allows him to recognize danger before adults can articulate it. In isolation psychology, heightened perception can either destroy or save you. Danny's ability to listen, retreat, and seek help contrasts sharply with Jack's denial. And a few final quick facts about the movie. Jack Nicholson actually improvised the film's iconic line, "Here's Johnny." And this was the only film that Danny Lloyd was ever in. At the time, he didn't realize he was filming a horror movie.
Well, didn't they change a bunch of stuff in the script that they gave him?
Yeah, to make it more
kid-friendly.
Kid-friendly.
What is it? What's the Kick slogan?
Kid tested, parent approved. Kicks are my favorite childhood cereal.
It's disgusting. They're gross.
No, they're not.
No, they are.
In the final snow scene, the filmmakers used 900 tons of salt.
Salt?
Yeah, for the snow. You know, Berry Berry Kicks, those were even better.
Okay, you're changing the subject. They literally salted the earth. Was it a studio? It must have been.
Okay, so that part of it was shot on a massive set in England, using a special mix of salt and crushed styrofoam for snow and ice.
That sounds really good for the environment.
Well, it was in a set, but yeah, still bad.
And then it all just went right in the trash.
The Shining is a great example of how winter isolation intensifies what's already there, turning personal instability and family conflict into something lethal. And just like the polar crews experienced paranoia and hallucinations from confinement, Jack Torrance's mental deterioration accelerates under isolation. John Carpenter's The Thing approaches isolation from the opposite direction, introducing an external threat that only becomes dangerous because the characters are cut off and unable to trust one another. In both stories, winter is not just a setting, but a condition that removes safety nets, limits escape, and forces characters to confront whether the real danger comes from within the group or from something outside of it. John Carpenter's The Thing was released in 1982, but based on 2 previous works. Originally, a novella from 1938 titled Who Goes There by John W. Campbell, which inspired the 1951 film The Thing from Another World. Who Goes There was first published in the August 1938 edition of Astounding Science Fiction. The story is set at a remote Antarctic research station, where a small group of scientists uncovers a crashed alien spacecraft buried in the ice. Inside, they find a frozen extraterrestrial organism that is later revealed to be a shapeshifter, capable of perfectly imitating any living being it absorbs.
I want to add one detail there.
Great.
That I found so frickin' cool. Because first off, this was 38, you said, right?
Yep.
Way before Ridley Scott did all his bullshit. I might be getting confused because this has been retconned multiple times through all the Thing reimaginings.
Sure.
But I don't think it's the actual Thing's spaceship. I don't think like that's the race of things that built it. It's very similar to the beginning of Ridley Scott's Alien, where they find this gigantic alien body with its like chest burst open because the xenomorph had like burst out of this other species. And similar to Ridley Scott, where he goes back and like retcons everything and explain that that's actually like the engineers and everything, and like makes perfect explanations. Originally, it was just a mystery. Just you don't know where the Thing comes from. It just really cements its complete otherworldly, its complete otherness, because it's a parasite. Even affects this spacefaring society and causes them to crash on Earth.
As the creature thaws and escapes, the station descends into paranoia. Because the alien can replicate individuals down to their memories and behaviors, no one can be certain who is still human. The group attempts to develop scientific tests to identify the imitation, but growing distrust undermines cooperation. At a high level, the story is less about defeating a monster than about the psychological collapse of a closed group under extreme conditions. The polar setting, with its cold, darkness, and lack of outside contact, intensifies fear and suspicion, turning survival into a battle against both the alien and the erosion of trust within the group.
In the original novella, it's still unclear if this thing is like evil, you know?
Sure, yeah.
It's just trying to survive. You know, when it thaws, and like it thaws because humans decide to thaw it.
Yeah.
It's like a definitive choice that they make because they assume it's dead, and it's the human condition of the need to know and explore.
Yeah.
And so they want to thaw it and take some samples, and you know, they want their names in the history books as the ones that discovered alien life. And in doing so, it's both the best thing and the worst thing. The worst thing because things go horrifically wrong by the thing being freed, but the best because it's in Antarctica.
Right.
You know, had they just transferred a ice block back to, you know, the U.S. or whatnot into a major city, and then the thing gets out and like, okay, now it takes over the planet. Oh, but okay. Anyways, the thing gets out and they immediately try to kill it because like it's freaking scary. It's a scared animal. Right? It's going to attack and do what it does. And so, but it's also highly intelligent. And so, like, what would you do if, like, humans woke up being, like, poked and prodded? You'd fight back.
Sure.
But then things get way out of control, and now it just becomes, like, a last man standing situation.
The 1951 film, The Thing from Another World, is not an exact remake of the novella. Who Goes There centers on distrust, scientific reasoning, and fear of imitation. The question is not how do we kill it, but who is still human. The 1951 film emphasizes military authority, action, and cooperation, with scientists often portrayed as reckless and the military as stabilizing. In the novella, paranoia is constant and justified. In the film, paranoia is minimal. The threat is visible and external.
It's a big monster walking around.
I mean, it's fun. Like the ending of that movie, it's almost like a Frankenstein. Like that's kind of what the creature looks like. And there's these really fun, this isn't a spoiler, but this really fun like lightning bolt shock scene, which like for the 50s, the technology felt pretty cool to see.
This has been, we're going to get there eventually, but it's not until the 2011, not remake, but like prequel. Yeah. Where you really get some good CGI technology to see the thing and what it can do. And first off, it's just such an interesting creature. It's probably one of my favorite movie monsters.
Yeah. The 2011 version or just in general?
The thing in general. Yes. And the 2011 did such a good job. The movie didn't do well, and I was expecting to hate it because the John Carpenter version is so beloved. But I thought it was incredible. I think it's one of my favorite prequels, and it's mostly just like how they used the thing. It's such an interesting organism where it just needs biomass. It's not going to just attack because if it can't survive. We see humans kill the thing monster again and again.
Yeah.
But if just like one cell survived, that's all that matters because one cell all just has to latch onto any other cell of anything.
Which makes it a really difficult enemy to defeat.
Yeah.
For many reasons.
Thank God it's in Antarctica.
Right. Right.
If they talk about this in the novella, had it landed anywhere else, had it splashed into the ocean, you would have been screwed because it would have just started eating fish.
Right.
And then gotten whales.
Yeah.
And then climbed onto land with all of the mass of a whale. And you see this in the 2011 and especially in the Thing video game from 2002. It's all sneaky and infiltratey because it's just biding its time to get biomass.
Right.
Once it gets enough, it says, fuck it. We're all coming together to make a giant monster because we can. And then once it becomes a giant monster, it's got enough to just attack. It doesn't need to be super sneaky anymore.
Right.
So just imagine, it gets a few whales under its belt and then pops up in New York and then just starts eating everybody.
Yeah.
That's a lot of biomass.
Yeah. But what's its end game? Because eventually at that rate, it would just snowball enough to take over everything. And then what? And then what does it do alone on the earth?
That's exactly what it does.
But then once everything is gone, what does it do?
I'm really glad you asked, Abby. So it's highly intelligent. It absorbs the memories and knowledge of any host. Hence why it's such a good infiltrator, because it's a carbon copy, memory-wise and personality-wise. It can be. It's a really good actor. But in the novella, there's one guy that like locks him. And actually, this happens in John Carpenter's version as well. There's one guy who doesn't trust anybody. He is locked in a shed because they suspect him of being a thing. And he's like, I'm going to lock the door from this side. I don't trust you. You don't trust me. I'm happy this way. Great. Okay, cool. Once they finally devise the test, they're like, should we go test him? Yeah, sure. Let's go test him. In the novella, he's been alone by himself for a week. And this is the end of the novella. And I'm going to give a spoiler because it's from 1938. He's not answering the door. And so they burst in and he's all in thing mode. And so they burn him. Okay, cool. They got him. They say had they been just 30 minutes later, the earth would have been lost because this guy, even despite being locked in, he's a thing. So he could just turn into a tiny little rope and sneak out through cracks. And he had a whole week to himself to build technology. And this is 1938, so it's pulp sci-fi. He was in the middle of building his anti-gravity jetpack.
Wow.
They had spent all this time disabling the vehicles, pulling out the starters, on all things.
Yeah.
They smashed they didn't have a helicopter. Whatever they had. They destroyed any way to leave. They smashed the radios, all this stuff so they couldn't call for help. Meanwhile, this thing was building his fucking anti-gravity jetpack out of spare parts because he had the technology of alien races, multiple. So all he had to do was get enough stuff to like populate, take over the Earth, and not even take over the Earth, just replace the Earth. That's all they do. What do humans do? They just exist. They proliferate and they spread like a disease. So they have the technology to build more spaceships because they've, consumed races that can build spaceships. And now they can leave Earth at any time.
So interesting. I mean, I think watching the movie, like the 82 movie, you don't quite... Like, it was fun for me. I guess what I'm trying to say is that it was fun for me to watch the 1951 and the 2011 version because it broadened my understanding of the thing.
Yeah, the novella is the most exposition you get about what's going on. And especially in John Carpenter's, like that's the whole point. You get no exposition. It's just, holy fuck.
Yeah.
This thing sucks.
Yeah.
We got to kill it.
Yeah, it's mimicking us. That's kind of what we understand.
And meanwhile, thank God for Kurt Russell and his flamethrower, because everyone else is like, oh, I don't know. You might be a thing, or but I don't want to hurt you. And Kurt Russell's like, oh, fuck you.
Yeah. John Carpenter's The Thing evolves the story even further. It tells the story of a research team in Antarctica that discovers a crashed alien spacecraft and a frozen creature, which we know, which soon thaws and begins assimilating and imitating the humans. As the shape-shifting alien spreads, paranoia consumes the isolated team. No one can tell who is still human. The survivors struggle to contain or destroy the creature, while paranoia and fear tear the group apart, turning the battle for survival into a tense psychological ordeal, as much of a fight against each other as it is against the external monster. The screenplay was written by Bill Lancaster. Of the $15 million budget, $1.5 million was used on Rob Bottin's creature effects.
Hell yeah.
And I think the film grossed about $19 million in the initial box office release.
And since then, an extra $37.
Well, the film was actually released initially to negative reviews. Shocking when we look back now and see how much of a cult classic it has become. But the cult classic status really took hold when it was released for home video and TV. Now it's often cited as one of the best science fiction horror movies ever made.
And just look at his hair.
I know.
Kurt Russell.
He's hot in that movie, yeah. The Thing inspired a video game and a 2011 prequel. Starting with a video game, which was released in 2002, and Alan has been staying up all night long, every night, to play.
Trying. And every time I think I'm at the end, it just keeps going.
It's like a simulator for when you're actually there in that situation.
I mentioned this on the last episode, but I do think that this is one of the best movie tie-in games ever made. Granted, the real horror is only in like the first, I don't even know how far I am in the game, first half maybe, before it becomes like far more like a military shooter type game.
Yeah.
But the what I've gleaned from this, and this is a sequel that takes place moments after John Carpenter's movie ends.
Which is cool. I like that premise. It's like Halloween, too.
Mm-hmm.
I like picking up the story, you know?
A team is brought in to, like, figure out what the hell's going on. A team of, like, military people.
Yeah.
And, everything is burned and whatnot. And so they check out the Norwegian camp. Similar, everything is destroyed. They're trying to figure out what's going on. And then, thing monsters are still rampant. I'm not sure which government was doing it, but a government agency had previously discovered the Thing's spaceship and was studying it, and they were trying to develop bioweapons. And guess what? It gets out. But not before they make some serious progress. And they were able to distill the Thing biology, virus, whatever you want to call it, into a means of control where someone is able to become a thing while still maintaining his human control. All the things are connected via hive mind. Talk about a super weird experience. He's simultaneously in all of the things and they're inside him, but he has control. Despite the fact that he retains his quote unquote humanity, he's also driven insane because he has the Thing's drive to spread over the planet.
Yikes.
It's a cool game. I highly recommend everybody play it.
The 2011 prequel stars Mary Elizabeth Winstead and Joel Edgerton. Set at the Norwegian Antarctic Research Station, as Alan said, just before the events of the 1982 film, The Thing from 2011 follows a team of scientists who uncovered the remains of an alien spacecraft and a partially frozen creature. That's the theme that remains true for all of these.
Yep.
As they attempt to study it, the alien begins to infect and imitate the team members, spreading rapidly and unpredictably. Again, isolation, mistrust, and the alien's shape-shifting abilities drive the survivors into paranoia, forcing them to question who is human and who has been assimilated, ultimately setting the stage for the events that unfold in the Carpenter classic.
It's an excellent prequel, and I think it incorporates so many of the themes of the original novella that John Carpenter's did not. So, like, you get exposition, you get to learn a bit more about the Thing, you get some real good looks at it.
Yeah, there's some really cool special effects.
So cool, especially, it's 2011. Like, by no means dated, but also it's 2000. You know,
effects from like the early 2000s, I feel like can age poorly.
They can.
Yeah.
These did not.
They were scary as hell.
The Thing looks super, super creepy, but not just for the sake of looking creepy. Things are pretty functional.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, faces are upside down. People are really twisted, but that's because like they're not using those organs for like function. They're just vestigial because that's the biomass that the Thing absorbed. And you get to see really how it attacks with all of its like tentacle bullshit is so freaking cool.
Yeah, it's fun. I like that there's a female protagonist too. I like that, you know, we have a refreshed version of the story.
I really like that we have a female protagonist, but in no part of the movie is there like a love story or is the romance involved just because she's a woman.
Yep.
No, she's just a
scientist.
A scientist. It's great.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
There's one joke about her being a woman, and that's about being stuck in Antarctica with a bunch of Norwegian dudes.
It's like the same thing we just said about being on a ship as a woman. The 2000s gave us a slew of horror films that center around isolation and the winter. Wind Chill from 2007 tells the story of college students stranded on a snowy road haunted by ghosts. It blends isolation and psychological horror. The film stars Emily Blunt and Ashton Holmes, and it has that distinct 2000s feel. I like this movie, I know Alan doesn't, because it combines isolation with the paranormal. Forcing the main characters to remain in place without resources, they are stuck in place while the paranormal unfolds around them. What's different here from a movie like The Shining is that the characters are very exposed to the elements. They are literally at risk of death from the cold, which adds to the tension.
I thought this movie was dumb. Especially, like, you know, we've been watching a lot of winter horror movies. It's a great theme. This one doesn't even have the Thing. But it has, you know, supernatural antagonists.
Yeah, I think it's cool. It's different. It's not like a perfect movie, but the concept is refreshing.
Yeah, the concept is refreshing. It has like the low budget horror feel.
Yeah.
Of like single location, small cast. But the world building is kind of cool because it not only adds ghosts, but it adds like a time loop mechanic.
Yeah.
Where like even when they escape, they keep waking back up.
It's like that video game Little Hope that we played, except it's wintry.
Yeah, protagonists don't know what's real.
Right.
That's a cool mechanic.
Yeah.
What I didn't like, it's basically like a 2-character movie outside of like the ghosts and shit. And like one is like a super creepy weirdo who thinks that kidnapping a woman is a great way to make her fall in love with him.
That's gross.
Which, okay, that's part of a plot. I understand. But then she like starts to sympathize with him and you get straight up Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah.
And like, come on, have some self-respect. Throw this guy out of the car. You know?
She does. I mean, she does, but she eventually...
I get it. It gets cold and she snuggles in.
Yeah.
But like, there's a way to do it. I don't know.
I mean, if you're in that desperate of a situation, I think your mental prowess starts to soften. You know?
Yeah. It's all about surviving. I understand. But also, like, I'd be so mad at this guy.
Yeah, he's the worst. Another film that Alan doesn't love, Let the Right One In from 2008, is a Swedish horror movie set in a snowy apartment complex in a Stockholm suburb, speaking of Stockholm. The film is adapted from a 2004 novel. The movie is set in the early 1980s. Let the Right One In follows a 12-year-old kid named Oscar, a lonely and bullied boy who befriends his new neighbor Eli, a mysterious child who turns out to be a centuries-old vampire. As their friendship grows, Oscar is drawn into Eli's dark world, witnessing the violence and moral ambiguity that comes with her need to feed. The story explores themes of isolation, friendship, and the desire for connection, using the vampire relationship as a lens to examine loneliness, adolescence, and the quiet horror that can lurk beneath everyday life.
Okay, so you did preface by saying I didn't like this movie, but I think I have to watch it again. I've only seen it once. This was not too long after it came out. And I went in with the expectation of like, check out the world's greatest vampire movie.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
And it's not, I mean, I know this is a very beloved movie.
It's like an art house film, you know?
And I am fresh off the kick of Underworld, right? Yeah. Talk about a great vampire movie. with vampire and werewolf bullet time action. And now
bullet time action.
Bullet time is a term coined by the Matrix, I guess. Things slow down so much that you just you see the bullets go through. Yeah.
Yep.
And I guess also maybe it was coined by Max Payne, where you activate bullet time. But whatever. It's not that type of movie. It's a think piece.
It's an indie film, yeah.
I think I watched this on a little screen, on my laptop or something, expecting a big romp of a vampire movie.
Yeah.
Not that.
Yeah. It's not. It's a very contained, slow burn character study, but I think it's beautiful in its own way. But yeah, you have to sort of be in the right mindset to watch something that's kind of mentally more draining than watching a film that you can tune out and just have a blast in.
I think this is also, I watched this during a period of my life when I thought that a movie was bad because it had subtitles.
Fair enough. Dead Snow from 2009 is a horror comedy with Nazi zombies in a remote Norwegian winter landscape. It plays on folklore and extreme cold.
This is the exact type of movie we used to always watch growing up, because every year around Halloween, throughout high school, we would do the ZM Squared, or the zombie movie marathon.
Yes.
So we would pick the dumbest zombie movies we could possibly find and just watch them on Halloween. It's a lot of fun. Dead Snow is actually a pretty good movie. It combines the perfect trope of villains. Zombies, which are the ultimate fodder for being able to shoot humans without having to move your moral compass, and zombies and Nazis, who also fit that trope in Hollywood for many, many years until the most recent times, where now you're forced to ask, but are they really bad? The answer is still yes, folks. But still, for the longest time, if you just needed a bad guy, you just threw Nazis in there. Looking at you, Indiana Jones.
But now I feel like they're horrifyingly too relevant and too active in the world again to be casually used in horror comedy movies.
Yeah, now now if you're just making something about killing Nazis, people are going to be like, well, you know what? It's important to hear both sides.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck off.
Fuck off. 30 Days of Night from 2007 is a vampire horror set in a town plunged into 30 days of polar darkness.
Now we have a great vampire movie set in the snow.
There we go. It's a great example of environmental isolation heightening terror. The movie is set in Barrow, Alaska, a town that experiences a month-long polar night each year. 30 Days of Night follows Sheriff Eben Olsen and his estranged wife Stella as the town is attacked by a gang of vampires who take advantage of the prolonged darkness. Trapped by snow and ice with no sunlight for 30 days, the townspeople must fight for survival against the relentless supernatural predators. The film focuses on isolation, endurance, and the psychological strain of facing an unending night where the line between life and death is constantly threatened. I mean, to me, this is one of the most clever concepts of a vampire movie. Of course, if vampires need to be in the darkness and die in sunlight, they're going to go to a town that's plagued by 30 days of night. It's so clever.
I mean, yeah. And they're not affected by the cold.
Right.
It's the perfect environment. This movie comes up every so often on the podcast just because I love it so much. And because it also follows my preferred formula of oh no, what are we going to do? And then at the very end, they say you know what? We're going to get really powerful and fight back. I love it so much. It also indirectly inspired my short story about werewolves on the moon.
Oh my gosh, I forgot about that one. We've talked about this so far in every episode of this series, but Frozen from 2010, again, not the Disney version, is a thriller that focuses on people trapped on a ski lift, playing with fear of isolation and hypothermia. This movie we've talked about, but I just want to mention it again because the entrapment and the isolation is the theme of this movie, right? They are stuck on a chairlift. They are stuck. They are alone. And in 2019, The Lodge is a bleak, dark horror film that couldn't be more perfect for this episode. It's a modern psychological horror movie that explores snowbound isolation, religious trauma, and unreliable perceptions. The Lodge follows two children, Aiden and Mia, who are left alone with their soon-to-be stepmother, Grace, at a remote winter cabin after their father leaves unexpectedly. Isolated by a blizzard, tensions rise as strange and unsettling events begin to occur. Grace's mysterious past emerges, including her involvement in a cult, and psychological horror escalates as the family becomes trapped by both the storm and their own fears. The film explores themes of grief, trauma, and the destabilizing effects of isolation, blurring the line between reality and psychological breakdown. I find The Lodge to be a tough watch, but one of my favorite horror films from, recent memory.
I didn't see it.
Yeah, well, maybe time for you to take a watch.
Been too busy with the thing.
The winter snow and ice isn't the driver for causing psychosis or mental instability, but it can create a situation that causes extreme isolation, which often results in horrible physical and mental experiences. As we've seen, winter and snow don't create madness, they amplify it, isolating the mind and stripping away the familiar anchors of society, light, and human connection. From polar expeditions to the Overlook Hotel, being alone can transform ordinary fear into profound psychological horror, turning the environment itself into an antagonist. But the terror of winter doesn't stop with the mind. Next week, we'll step beyond the psychological and into the supernatural, exploring the chilling world of winter monsters, the creatures, legends, and folklores that stalk the snow, preying on both body and imagination.
I don't really know where we're going to go with this, because we just talked about The Thing, we talked about vampires, we talked about snow ghosts. If it's going to get even more, wow.
Next time on Lunatics Radio Hour. Looking for even more creepy content? Consider joining our Patreon for way more content just like this, including bonus episodes and very special deep dives. You can also join us on Discord if you want to stay involved in the conversation, and find our video content on YouTube, TikTok, or Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, anywhere you like to get your social updates. And of course, head to lunaticsproject.com where you'll find our very, very spooky merch and links to everything you need to know.
Are you upset by our egregious fabrication of facts? Tell us about it on Discord.